when I got on a plane on Friday morning, I thought I had a few days to come to Amsterdam, be on your show, do a few other things, and go back to Beirut by Tuesday.
You sort of felt comfortable, even this was a very dire time, because also we were wondering, we are so grateful that you are here. At the same time, you have family members in Beirut and surrounding the city. Your mom is there, your sister is there. By the way, your mom is born in this city, right?
Ja.
Je moeder komt uit Amsterdam.
Ja, mijn moeder is Nederlands.
En je spreekt ook Nederlands.
Ik spreek ook Nederlands, maar we doen dit in het Engels.
Geen probleem. But which is fascinating, actually, that your mom is there. But so we were just wondering, how do you leave the country? As you said, it looked maybe that there could be a peace agreement, but at the same time, the rockets are coming in.
I wouldn't go as far as a peace agreement, but because it was very clear that the Israeli strategy from now on was escalation.
Okay.
So I was not planning on hoping on a peace agreement, but I thought that we had a few days of a lull before either there would be an agreement of some sort, a truce, a temporary truce. It was always going to be temporary, or that things would break down and we would go into real escalation, which is what we saw. And what I find incredible is that the Biden administration keeps talking about ceasefires, whether in Gaza or now in Lebanon. They keep saying, we have a promise we have spoken to our Israeli allies. They have said they are ready for a ceasefire. And then the next day you wake up and there's a further incursion into Gaza and now further escalation in Lebanon.
Does this mean that the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is a lame duck? Is he being lied to by Prime Minister Netanyahu? What is your conclusion here? What is happening?
I think it's a combination of real support for Israel, traditional, long-standing support by the United States and the international community for Israel, with an Israeli prime minister who is, trying to stay in power, by all means, trying to prolong this war until after the US elections in the hope that perhaps that can help his friend, Donald Trump, come to power in the US. He would prefer Donald Trump as a president rather than Kamala Harris. And it's a combination, I think, of a traumatized country, Israel, that lived through the atrocities of October 7th, that wants to feel that it can get revenge for what happened on that day, a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. And so now they're hoping to score victories in Lebanon, because there have not been many victories in Gaza in that war, and there have been many civilian casualties, and the count is rising.
Over 1,000 in Lebanon now. You are flying out on Friday morning. That same day, the leader of Hezbollah, in the eyes of Israel, he is the terrorist that killed so many people, is being killed in your city. This is happening very close by to the airport, right?
Yes, very close by to where I live.
Yes, and as you described, Benjamin Netanyahu is in New York, probably talking to the White House. And then we see this photo of him in his hotel room, I presume, where he gives the go-ahead, the green light to kill the Hezbollah leader, a terrorist. When you heard the news, what was your first reaction?
I was on the plane. I was flying through Madrid. I landed in Amsterdam and I saw all the news. My first reaction was, I need to go home. I need to go back. I need to make sure that I can get back home, because I don't know how long this is going to last, and I cannot be stuck abroad. It is an interesting human reaction that many of my friends have had as well. People who were abroad when the latest escalation started, who wanted to go home. Some people wanted to leave, but nobody wants to be a refugee, really.
Is that your fear, that you cannot go back?
I will find a way to go back, but I'm just saying that in general, I don't want this to be about me. In general, nobody wants to be a refugee. You know, if we can live in peace in our own countries, that's our preference. And so the human reaction is to try to go home, try to be with family, try to be with community, and wait for what might come next. You see, we've been through this before. Lebanon is an exhausted country. In the last 4 years, we've had an economic collapse, one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in modern history in Lebanon, with the Beirut port explosion, for which Hezbollah has been accused of having some kind of involvement because of whatever they might have been storing at the port. We've been through COVID, like everybody, and now a year of border clashes between Israel and Hezbollah on the northern, on our border between Lebanon and Israel. But that comes after also, decades of strife in Lebanon, a civil war, several Israeli invasions, and several wars between Israel and Hezbollah. And what I find incredible to see now is, one, is this idea that what Israel wants is to escalate so that it can de-escalate. I mean, the idea that you can, bomb your way to peace is really rather incredible. I find that, difficult to accept, that this can lead to positive outcomes. But more ironically is that Israel is trying today to destroy a problem that it created when it invaded Lebanon in 1982.
Can you explain?
In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon all the way up to Beirut, laid siege to the city. 17,000 people died because it wanted to remove the Palestinian guerrilla fighters who were there from the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And they did. It was a tactical success, but it was a strategic disaster because 2 days after that invasion began, the Iranians sent fighters to Syria and then onwards to Lebanon, and they created Hezbollah.
And that's the target now of Israel. As you know, in Israel, a lot of people agree now with Netanyahu and say this is a big success. After the pager attacks that we had a week ago, now the leadership is decapitated. The #1 guy is dead, the #2 guy is dead. There is a feeling of relief that this is happening. You see something else happening.
I can understand that, even though I would never condone any violence by anyone. I can, from a pragmatic perspective, I can understand the description of this as a tactical success. I'm not sure what the strategy is. What comes next? More war, more invasions, more ground incursions. What is the outcome? What is the outcome here? And what are we trying to really achieve beyond settling old scores and beyond bringing a sense of relief and victory for Israelis? Because I also want to clarify something, that Hezbollah has a lot of opponents in Lebanon. Not many people are going to cry the death of Hassan Nasrallah. Right? He has Lebanese blood on his hands. He has American blood on his hands. He has Syrian blood on his hands. Hezbollah was involved for 10 years in Syria on the sides of Bashar al-Assad, that pesky little war in Syria that nobody in the West really wanted to pay attention to. Hezbollah was involved with the Russians and with the Iranians.
Are you relieved that he is gone?
I want to see an outcome that is peaceful for the region. I want to understand what is the strategy here. And I worry, as I said, Hezbollah has many opponents, but no one in Lebanon is going to believe Benjamin Netanyahu when he says, our enemy is not the Lebanese people, our enemy is Hezbollah. Because we've been here before, we've seen what happens when Israel invades Lebanon, and we've been watching Gaza for the last year.
And that's the fear, that Lebanon will be the next Gaza. Now, let's see what is happening in the neighboring countries. You know that Supreme Leader Khamenei of Iran has said, we cannot accept this. There will be revenge. So the next question is, will Iran step in, and will this spread to the region? Will this be the start of a bigger war, not the ending of it?
I'm always very careful to predict the demise of either Hezbollah, or I have been very careful in the past predicting the demise of Hezbollah or the demise of the Iranian regime. There have been many times when people said, oh, you know, this is the end of the Iranian regime. I think we should be very careful. But I do think that Hezbollah is in chaos. It is on the back foot. That can lead to two scenarios. They don't have what it takes to fight back, or they go crazy with retribution inside Lebanon against their political opponents, and, you know, massive launching of rockets against northern Israel. Those are the two scenarios when it comes to just Hezbollah. When it comes to Iran, Iran doesn't want a wider war because it knows that it would become itself a target. And Iran has been very good at using proxies like Hezbollah, like Shia militias in Iraq, like the Houthis in Yemen, to keep the war far away from its borders and fight, as many people in the Arab world say, fight Israel until the last Arab. Now they feel that they could become the next target. It's getting closer. Their best ally, the jewel in the crown of the Iranian forward defense strategy, is being decimated, Hezbollah. And so my expectation, and I could be wrong, my expectation is they're actually not going to do very much about it. They're going to, you know, scream about revenge, but they're going to quietly negotiate with the Americans. They're going to mourn Hassan Nasrallah and say that they will avenge him. But they haven't avenged Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in 2020. They haven't avenged Ismail Haniyeh, who was just killed in Tehran over the summer. And that is also something that Hezbollah's supporters in Lebanon are now realizing, that they're on their own.
So could that mean that then the Prime Minister of Israel is right, that his strategy by going in with brute force, killing the leadership, will maybe end in a peaceful situation in the end?
That is a very optimistic scenario, but like I said, escalation for de-escalation usually leads to other problems. You know, as I just mentioned, in 1982, you remove the PLO, you have Hezbollah. What are we going to get today? Is Israel drunk on success? That it will not, is it drunk on success? Will it not know how to stop? Are the Americans going to hold them back and say, you know, we need to pause here to be able to make sure that Lebanon doesn't descend into total chaos? I found that the latest statement following the call between the U.S. Secretary of Defense and the Israeli Secretary, the U.S. Minister of Defense, was a bit concerning because it was all about support for Israel and going after terrorist organizations without any call for de-escalation or protection of civilians. And I think that is a mistake. It seems as though the Americans have accepted that their calls for a ceasefire are not going to be heard today by the Israelis.
President Biden has said about the killing of Nasrallah, this is a measure of justice for victims of Hezbollah terrorism. So, as you say, there's nothing, a lot to expect maybe from Washington at this moment. You're going back to your country, at least.
I hope so.
You're trying to go back on Tuesday. Again, this airport that you have to fly into is very much near the places that are being attacked right now by Israeli army. What is the country that you will go back to?
I will tell you when I land. I've lived through 15 years of civil war in Lebanon during the 80s. I lived through the Israeli invasion of 1982. We had to flee Beirut because we lived also very close to the fighting. We got on a bus to Syria at the time, which was then possible, and flew to the Netherlands to spend a couple of months here, waiting for us to be able to go back. Our house was completely destroyed. And again, I want to emphasize, people thought in 1982 that the Israeli invasion was the beginning of a new positive phase. The PLO was gone, a new president was elected, Bashir Gemayel, who momentarily looked like he could be a national leader for all of Lebanon and unite the country. And I know that some people think that this might be the next phase after what just happened in Lebanon with the killing of Nasrallah. But if history is a precedent, that's not what we're going to see. We're going to see what really happened after 1982, which is the complete disintegration of Lebanon, new terrorist organizations rising, fighting a ground incursion of Israel in southern Lebanon, new resistance movements, however you want to call them, and potentially civil strife within Lebanon. Hezbollah's supporters are reeling from this loss. The Shia community feels defenseless. This is not always a very united country, but there is some hope and a lot of work internally to try now to unite people and make sure that we put Lebanon's interests first. Nobody wants to die for Iran. That's one thing that I think most Lebanese today can agree on. Whether they can coalesce and whether international politics, US actions and Israeli actions give the Lebanese the space to come together is something that we will see in the coming days.
I wish you a very safe flight back to Lebanon, to Beirut, and many thanks for coming to Buitenhof. And also I want to mention that this afternoon you will speak in the Bali here in the city center of Amsterdam. It's completely sold out. No tickets available, but there is a live stream on YouTube that the Bali will provide. So thanks again and safe travels.
Thanks for having me. Great to be on the show.
Thank you.
Bedankt voor het kijken. Vond je dit een goed gesprek? Vergeet je vooral niet te abonneren, een like of een comment achter te laten. Dat kan natuurlijk ook.
The radical thing to do right now is to demand peace. Is to demand that the people who are living in Israel-Palestine get what they deserve, which is peace, security, equality, and yes, liberty.